The coffee splashed across Marcus Webb's worn jacket before he even saw it coming. Laughter erupted through the gleaming marble lobby of Titanstone Financial as the dark liquid dripped onto the floor he'd just finished mopping. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Derek Cashman said, his voice dripping with sarcasm as fake as his tan. "I didn't see you there. You people just blend into the shadows, you know?" More laughter. Marcus stood perfectly still, his jaw tight, dark eyes fixed on an expanding stain. This was the moment when 23 days of humiliation, of whispered slurs, of accidentally knocked over trash cans and crude jokes would finally end. But not yet. Not quite yet. He slowly bent down, pulled out his cleaning cloth, and began wiping up the spill as Derek's Gucci loafers stepped deliberately closer, forcing him to clean around them. That's right. Derek announced to his audience of junior traders and assistants. Know your place. What none of them knew, what none of them could possibly imagine as they laughed at the quiet black man in the janitor's uniform, was that Marcus Webb wasn't just any janitor. He was the founder and CEO of Webb Enterprises, a technology conglomerate worth $4.2 billion. And in exactly 7 minutes, he was about to buy this entire building and everything in it, including their jobs, their futures, and their pathetic little careers. But let's go back. Let's go back to where this all started. Because revenge, real revenge, the kind that changes lives and shatters illusions, that kind of revenge requires patience, planning, and a very good reason. Marcus Webb had all three. For weeks earlier, he'd received a call from his goddaughter, Jasmine, a brilliant 24-year-old data analyst who'd landed her dream job at Titanstone Financial. She called him crying, something she hadn't done since she was 9 years old. "Uncle Marcus," she'd sob into the phone, "I can't do this anymore. I just can't." The story came out in broken pieces. The jokes about her hair. The questions about whether she was an affirmative action hire. The way her ideas in meetings were ignored until a white colleague repeated them. The casual touches that lasted too long. The comments about her body. The systematic, relentless grinding down of a young woman who'd graduated top of her class from MIT. Marcus had built his empire from nothing. From a single software program he'd coded in his mother's basement in Detroit. He'd faced racism. He'd been underestimated. He'd been denied loans and partnerships and opportunities. But he'd never forgotten where he came from, and he'd never stopped fighting for people who reminded him of his younger self. So he'd made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone else. He would go undercover. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Titanstone Financial was hemorrhaging money, badly managed by executives who cared more about their bonuses than the company's future. They were 3 months from bankruptcy, though they didn't know it yet. Marcus had his team at Webb Enterprises quietly buy up their debt through shell corporations, positioning himself to quiet a company for pennies on the dollar. But he wanted more than just ownership. He wanted to see it. He wanted to witness firsthand the culture that had broken his goddaughter's spirit. He wanted to understand exactly who needed to go and who deserved to stay. So Marcus Webb, billionaire CEO, became Marcus Webb, night janitor. He had his people create a perfect backstory, complete with references and a work history. He bought used clothes from thrift stores. He learned the proper way to strip and wax floors. He showed up for his interview with dirt under his fingernails and got hired on the spot because the facility's manager barely looked at him. "You speak English good," the manager had said, as if bestowing a compliment. Marcus had just nodded, and for 3 weeks, he'd cleaned toilets and emptied trash cans and listened. He'd listened to everything. The investment floor was the worst. Derek Cashman ruled it like a petty tyrant, a mediocre trader who'd inherited his position from his father and spent more time playing golf than analyzing markets. He surrounded himself with younger versions of himself, men who measured their worth in the price of their watches and the models they dated. They threw around racial slurs like confetti when they thought no one important was listening. They rated women on a scale of 1 to 10 as they walked by. They bragged about insider trading and falsified reports. And they treated the support staff, especially the black and brown support staff, like they were invisible at best and subhuman at worst. Marcus documented everything. His janitor's uniform had a button camera. He recorded conversations. He took photos of emails left open on screens. He built a case that would have made any prosecutor weep with joy. But he also saw the other side. He saw Jasmine, working twice as hard as everyone else, staying until midnight to perfect reports that her supervisor would take credit for. He saw Marie, a 58-year-old black woman in accounting who'd been passed over for promotion 11 times despite having more knowledge than her department head. He saw David, a gay Asian analyst who kept his head down and his personal life secret because he'd seen what happened to the last person who'd been openly out. He saw good people ground down by a toxic system, and he saw exactly who was responsible. The coffee incident happened on a Thursday morning, which was perfect because Marcus had scheduled the acquisition announcement for Thursday afternoon. He'd timed it precisely. Derek had arrived at 7 a.m., unusually early because he was trying to impress some potential clients touring the building at 9. He'd been on his phone, not watching where he was going, and had quite literally run into Marcus in the lobby. The coffee had been hot, expensive, and all over both of them. But Derek's reaction had nothing to do with the accident, and everything to do with who he thought Marcus was. A janitor. A black janitor. Someone beneath him. Someone he could humiliate for entertainment. The small crowd that had gathered included 2 of the potential clients, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. It included Jasmine, arriving for her early shift, her face going pale as she recognized what was happening. And it included Richard Chun, Titanstone's current CEO, a weak man who'd inherited the position and spent most of his time trying not to make waves. "Derek," Richard said weakly, "maybe we should what?" Derek snapped. "This idiot just ruined my Armani suit. Look at this. Do you know how much this costs?" He turned back to Marcus, who was still calmly cleaning. "You're going to pay for this. I'm having it taken out of your paycheck. Every last penny." Marcus straightened slowly. He was 6'3", and as he rose to his full height, something in his posture changed. The subservience fell away like a discarded coat. His shoulders squared. His chin lifted. His eyes, which had been carefully downcast for weeks, now locked onto Derek's with an intensity that made the younger man take an involuntary step backward. "No," Marcus said quietly. It was the first time most of them had heard him speak beyond a mumbled, "Excuse me," or "Yes, sir." His voice was deep, educated, and carried the kind of natural authority that made people listen. "What did you just say to me?" Derek sputtered, his face reddening. Marcus checked his watch, an old Timex he bought specifically for this assignment. "I said no. And actually, Derek, I'm not a janitor. Well, I have been for the past 3 weeks, but that's not really my primary occupation." He reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out his phone, the only piece of his real life he'd allowed himself to keep. It was the latest model, looked expensive and out of place in his callous hands. He tapped the screen a few times, then turned it around so the growing crowd could see. "I'm Marcus Webb. I'm the founder and CEO of Webb Enterprises, and as of approximately 4 minutes ago, I am the majority owner of this building, this company, and effectively, Derek, I'm your boss." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Derek's face went through a remarkable transformation, from red to white to a sort of grayish green. That's not possible," he stammered. "You're a janitor. You're black?" Marcus supplied helpfully. "Yes, I noticed that too. Funny thing about being black, Derek, people tend to make assumptions. They tend to see what they expect to see. A black man with a mop must be a janitor. Can't possibly be anything else, right?" He looked around at the assembled crowd, his gaze sharp and measuring. "For the past 23 days, I've worked here as part of the facility staff. I've cleaned your toilets, emptied your trash, and listened to every word you thought no one important was hearing. I've documented 73 instances of racial discrimination, 41 cases of sexual harassment, 22 violations of SEC trading regulations, and enough general incompetence to fill a textbook on how not to run a financial services company." Richard Chun had gone very pale. "Mr. Webb, I can explain." "I'm sure you can, Richard. I'm sure you have lots of explanations for how this company went from being a respected institution to a toxic cesspool, losing money hand over fist. But we'll get to that. Right now, I want to talk about Derek." Marcus took a step closer to the young trader, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Derek, I've watched you for 3 weeks. I've seen you steal credit from your team members. I've heard you use racial slurs when you thought no one who mattered was listening. I've watched you sexually harass 3 different women, including my goddaughter. I've seen you falsify trading reports and engage in what I'm fairly certain the SEC would classify as insider trading. And just now, you assaulted me, spilled coffee on me, and then tried to humiliate me in front of witnesses because you thought I was just a janitor. Because you thought I was just a black janitor who couldn't fight back. He pulled out a small device from his other pocket and held it up. This is a recording device. It's been running for 3 weeks. Everything you've said and done is documented. I have enough evidence to have you arrested, disbarred from trading, and sued into oblivion. Derek's legs seemed to give out, and he sat down hard on the marble floor. Please, he whispered. Please, I have student loans, I have a mortgage, you have a trust fund, Marcus corrected coldly. You have a father who gave you this job despite the fact that you barely graduated from business school. You have privilege you've never questioned and power you've never earned. What you're about to have, Derek, is a security escort off the premises and a permanent ban from this industry. He turned to the head of security, a competent woman named Patricia, who'd always treated the cleaning staff with respect. Ms. Rivera, please escort Mr. Cashman from the building. His employment is terminated effective immediately. As Derek was led away, still stammering protests, Marcus addressed the rest of the crowd. There's going to be a company-wide meeting in the main conference room in 1 hour. Attendance is mandatory. We have a lot to discuss about the future of this company. People scattered like startled birds. Marcus caught Jasmine's eye across the lobby. She was crying, but this time they were different tears. He gave her a small nod, and she nodded back, understanding passed between them without words. Richardson approached cautiously. Mr. Webb, I had no idea that I was black, that I was capable, or that your company was falling apart. Marcus interrupted. Richard, you're a good man, but you're a terrible CEO. You inherited a position you weren't qualified for, and spent 3 years trying not to make waves instead of actually leading. This company is bleeding talent because good people can't stand a toxic culture, and bleeding money because incompetent people like Derek are making decisions. That ends today. Are you firing me? Richard asked, his voice small. Marcus considered him for a long moment. No, but I'm demoting you. You're going to be VP of Operations, a position you might actually be qualified for. Marie Washington from accounting is going to be the new CEO. She forgot more about running a financial services company than you ever learned, and she's earned the position about 11 times over. The meeting an hour later was standing room only. Marcus had changed, no longer in a janitor's uniform, but in an impeccably tailored Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than most of the employees made in a month. He stood at the front of the room, and the transformation was complete. This was Marcus Webb, billionaire CEO, and he commanded the room with ease. Let me tell you a story, he began. 25 years ago, I was a kid from Detroit with a computer and a dream. I built a software program in my mother's basement that revolutionized data encryption. I tried to get funding. I pitched to 57 venture capital firms. 57. You know how many even gave me a meeting? 3. You know what they all told me? That I seem articulate, but they weren't sure someone like me could scale a business. Someone like me, black, from the wrong neighborhood, without the right connections. He paused, letting that sink in. I eventually found a mentor, a woman who saw past the color of my skin and invested in the quality of my ideas. I built Web Enterprises from nothing, and now it's worth over $4 billion. We employ 12,000 people across 6 continents, and we did by focusing on one simple principle. Talent is universal, but opportunity is not. For 3 weeks, I've watched this company waste talent, crush potential, and reward mediocrity. I've watched good people driven out because they didn't fit a narrow definition of who deserves success. That ends today. He clicked a remote, and the screen behind him lit up with organizational charts. Effective immediately, we're implementing the following changes. First, Derek Cashman and 6 other employees documented engaging in discriminatory behavior are terminated. They'll receive severance packages and the opportunity to resign quietly rather than be fired for cause. But they're done here. Second, We're promoting 15 employees who've been systematically overlooked despite their qualifications. The full list is being emailed to everyone right now, but I want to highlight a few. Marie Washington is your new CEO. David Chun is your new head of quantitative analysis. Jasmine Webb is your new director of data analytics. These people earned these positions years ago but were passed over because of bias, conscious or unconscious. There was murmuring in the crowd, some supportive, some uncomfortable. Marcus continued. Third, we're implementing mandatory training on bias, discrimination, and harassment. If you think that's woke, nonsense, there's a door. This is a business, and bias is bad for business. We're leaving money on the table when we don't promote the best people. We're losing talent when we create toxic environments. This isn't about being politically correct. This is about being profitable. He clicked to the next slide, showing financial projections. Under current management, this company would be bankrupt within 6 months. Under new management, with the right people in the right positions and Web Enterprises resources behind you, we project growth of 40% within 2 years. You can be part of that growth, or you can leave. Your choice. The questions started then, and Marcus answered them all with patience and precision. Yes, there would be restructuring. Yes, some people would be let go, but it would be based on performance, not prejudice. Yes, salaries would be reviewed, and several underpaid employees would be receiving significant raises. No, he wasn't going to apologize for going undercover. Some of you are angry that I deceived you, he said, addressing an uncomfortable question from a junior analyst. You feel like I wasn't honest about who I was. But I would ask you to consider this. For 3 weeks, you treated me a certain way because you thought I was a janitor. You made assumptions about my intelligence, my worth, my humanity based on the uniform I wore and the job I did. Some of you were kind, and I appreciate that. But many of you didn't even see me. I was invisible to you. And I would argue that says more about your biases than my deception. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, roughly 20% of the staff had resigned, which was exactly what Marcus had expected and, frankly, wanted. They were dead weight, people more committed to the old toxic culture than to actual excellence. The remaining 80%, the ones who stayed, they were the ones worth investing in. In the days that followed, the story leaked to the press, which was also part of Marcus's plan. Billionaire CEO goes undercover to expose workplace racism was a headline that went viral. The response was mixed, as he'd expected. Some people praised him as a hero. Others accused him of being a publicity stunt. Some said he should have reported the discrimination through proper channels instead of engaging in deception. Marcus didn't care much about the hot takes and think pieces. He cared about results. Within a week, Titanstone Financial, now a subsidiary of Web Enterprises, had a new management team, new policies, and a new culture. They also had a new name, Titanstone Web Financial. The old guard was gone. The new guard was hungry, diverse, and talented. 3 months later, they closed their most profitable quarter in 5 years. 6 months later, they'd won awards for workplace culture and diversity. A year later, they were the fastest-growing financial services company in the region. But the real story, the one Marcus cared about most, was smaller and more personal. It was Jasmine, thriving in her new role, mentoring other young analysts of color. It was Marie, finally getting the recognition she deserved after decades of being overlooked. It was David, who brought his husband to the company holiday party and didn't have to hide anymore. It was the janitors, the real ones, getting raises and being treated with respect by the new management. It was culture change, real and lasting. Marcus still thought about that morning in the lobby sometimes, about the moment Derek's face had changed when he'd realized who Marcus really was. People asked him if he'd enjoyed that moment, the big reveal, the shock and horror on Derek's face. He always told them no. There was no joy in it. There was satisfaction, yes, the satisfaction of justice served. But mostly there was sadness that it had been necessary at all, that in the year 2024, a black man could still be judged so completely by the color of his skin and the uniform he wore. The real victory wasn't humiliating Derek Cashman. The real victory was changing the system that had created and protected people like Derek Cashman. The real victory was building something better. 6 months after the acquisition, Marcus stood in what used to be Derek's office, now occupied by David, and looked out over the city. Jasmine joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Uncle Marcus," she said, handing him one, "I never got to properly thank you. What you did, going undercover, buying a company, that was insane." "Yes, it was," he agreed. "Your mother thinks I've lost my mind. Your grandmother thinks I should have just had him arrested and been done with it. But sometimes the right thing and the easy thing aren't the same thing. And sometimes to fix a broken system, you have to understand it from the inside. You have to see it, really see it, the way the people being hurt by it see it every day." Jasmine was quiet for a moment, then said, "Derek's father called me last week. Wanted to know if I'd testify that his son wasn't really a bad person, just misguided. Said Derek's in therapy now, learning about his privilege and his biases." "What did you tell him?" Marcus asked. "I told him that I hoped therapy worked for Derek. I really did, but that his son's personal growth wasn't my responsibility. My responsibility was to the woman I used to be, the one who cried herself to sleep because she thought maybe she really wasn't good enough. My responsibility was to make sure no one else here ever had to feel that way again." Marcus smiled. "That's exactly right." "I also told him that Derek still owed you for the suit," Jasmine added with a slight grin. Marcus laughed, a real laugh that echoed through the office. "You know, I never did send him that dry cleaning bill. That Armani suit cost $3,000. Your janitor uniform cost $15," Jasmine pointed out. "Best $15 I ever spent," Marcus said. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city below, thinking about how much had changed and how much still needed to change. The story of Marcus Webb going undercover became something of a legend in business circles. Other CEOs started doing their own versions of it, though most lacked his patience and commitment. It started conversations about bias, about privilege, about the invisible barriers that keep talented people from reaching their potential. But for Marcus, it was never about the legend or the conversations or even the business success, though all those things mattered. It was about the young woman working late on a report who didn't have to be afraid anymore. It was about the analyst who could bring his whole self to work. It was about the 58-year-old accountant who finally got the job she deserved for a decade. It was about changing lives, one company, one culture, one person at a time. And it had all started with a cup of spilled coffee, a moment of casual cruelty, and a powerful man who'd been willing to make himself invisible to see the truth. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, you have to lose yourself to find what matters. You have to be willing to be underestimated, to be invisible, to be dismissed, so that you can truly understand what it means to be seen. Derek Cashman learned that lesson the hard way. Richard Chin learned it too. And the 80% of employees who'd stayed at Titanstone Web Financial, they'd learned it as well. They'd learned that the man mopping the floor might be watching, that the woman at the lowest rung of the ladder might deserve to be at the top. That talent doesn't wear a uniform, and intelligence doesn't have a color, and potential exists everywhere if you're willing to see it. The coffee stain never did come out of Marcus's old janitor's jacket. He kept it anyway, hanging in his office at Webb Enterprises headquarters, a reminder of what he'd learned in those 3 weeks. He'd learned that he'd built a successful company, yes, but he could still do more. He could still fight harder. He could still make more of a difference. He'd learned that sometimes the best view of a company wasn't from the top floor, but from the ground floor, where the people who kept everything running were usually invisible to those in power. And he'd learned that his goddaughter was stronger than he'd even imagined, and that the next generation was going to be okay, because there were people like her willing to fight for what was right. A year after the undercover operation, Marcus was invited to speak at a conference on workplace diversity. The organizers wanted him to tell the story of going undercover, of the dramatic reveal, of bringing down the corrupt executives. He told a different story instead. He told them about a woman named Patricia Rivera, head of security at Titanstone, who'd always treated the cleaning staff with respect and dignity, about how she'd helped him when he was struggling to learn the industrial floor buffer, not knowing who he was, just seeing someone who needed help. He told them about James, another janitor, who'd shared his lunch with Marcus one day when Marcus had forgotten his, and who'd told him stories about his grandson who wanted to be an engineer. He told them about the small kindnesses he'd witnessed alongside the cruelties, the glimmers of human decency that persisted even in toxic environments. "The point," Marcus told the conference, "isn't that I was some hero who saved the day. The point is that there are good people everywhere at every level, and our systems often fail to recognize them. The point is that we judge people by the wrong metrics. We value where they went to school over what they know. We value who they know over what they can do. We value the surface over the substance. And in doing so, we waste human potential on a massive scale." He paused, looking out at the audience of HR professionals, diversity officers, and corporate executives. "You want to know the real secret to success? Hire the best people, not the people who look like success. Promote based on merit, not comfort. Create environments where people can bring their whole selves to work, not just the parts that make you comfortable. It's not complicated. It's just hard because it requires you to examine your own biases, your own assumptions, your own complicity in systems that don't serve everyone equally." The speech went viral, which Marcus found both gratifying and frustrating. Gratifying because the message was spreading. Frustrating because he knew that most people would watch the video, nod along, maybe share on social media, and then go back to their lives and their companies without changing anything fundamental. Real change was harder than a viral video. Real change required commitment, resources, and a willingness to be uncomfortable. But some people listened. Some companies really did try to do better. And that was something. 2 years after the undercover operation, Marcus stood in the lobby of Titanstone Web Financial, the same lobby where Derek had spilled coffee on him. The marble floor gleamed, cleaned by a facility staff that was now better paid, better treated, and better respected. The walls featured photos of employees, a diverse tapestry of faces representing the company's transformation. One of those faces was Jasmine's, smiling confidently in her director portrait. Another was Marie's, dignified and proud in her CEO photo. Marcus had come for a dedication ceremony. The company was naming their new mentorship program after James, the janitor who'd share his lunch, who'd retired a year before after his grandson had indeed become an engineer, helped by a scholarship from the Webb Foundation. As Marcus looked around at the assembled employees, at the culture they built together, at the success they'd achieved by focusing on talent over prejudice, he thought about that moment 2 years ago, the moment when he'd straightened up, shed the invisible cloak of the underestimated, and revealed himself. It had been dramatic, yes. It had been satisfying, certainly. But the real satisfaction was this: standing in a lobby that represented everything his undercover operation had been fighting for. A place where people were judged by their contributions, not their color. Where talent was nurtured, not wasted. Where respect was given freely, not rationed based on job titles and pay grades. As the ceremony began, and Marcus listened to Marie speak about the importance of mentorship and opportunity, he caught sight of someone at the back of the crowd. It was Derek Cashman. Marcus almost didn't recognize him. The swagger was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine humility. Derek was dressed simply, working as a junior analyst at a small firm, rebuilding a career he destroyed through his own prejudice and cruelty. Their eyes met across the room. Derek looked like he wanted to disappear, but he didn't look away. He nodded slightly, an acknowledgement of everything that had happened, everything he'd lost, everything he'd learned. Marcus nodded back. Not forgiveness, exactly, but acknowledgement. The acknowledgement that people could change, could grow, could become better than they were. After the ceremony, Derek approached him cautiously. "Mr. Webb," he said, his voice quiet, "I know I don't deserve to speak to you. I know I don't deserve your time. But I wanted to say that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. I've spent 2 years in therapy, working on myself, try to understand why I thought it was okay to treat people the way I did. I'm not making excuses. There are no excuses. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better." Marcus studied him for a long moment. "Derek," he said finally, "I don't need your apology, but there are other people who might. Jasmine, Marie, David, all the people you hurt with your actions and your words. If you're really trying to be better, start there." "I have," Derek said. "I've reached out to everyone I could find, everyone I hurt. Some of them accepted my apologies. Most didn't. I don't blame them. Good, Marcus said, because the work of becoming better isn't about making yourself feel better. It's about making amends and not repeating the same mistakes. It's about using whatever privilege you have to lift others up instead of pushing them down. Derek nodded. I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to do better now. I volunteer with at-risk youth. I mentor kids who look nothing like me. I speak at schools about my mistakes, about prejudice, about privilege. It's not enough, but it's something. Marcus considered this. You're right. It's not enough, but it's a start. Keep going. Keep growing. And maybe someday you'll have made enough of a difference that the scales will balance a little. As Derek walked away, Jasmine joined Marcus. I saw that, she said. What did he want? To apologize. To show me he's changed. Do you believe him? Jasmine asked. Marcus thought about it. I believe he's trying. Whether he succeeds, that's up to him. But I also believe in second chances, in the possibility of redemption. Not because people deserve it, but because the world is better when people have the opportunity to grow beyond their worst moments. You're kinder than I am, Jasmine said. Not kinder, Marcus corrected. Just older. I've seen more. I've learned that holding on to anger, while sometimes necessary and justified, can also be exhausting. I've learned to focus my energy on building rather than destroying, on creation rather than revenge. Even though revenge felt pretty good, I bet, Jasmine said with a slight smile. Marcus laughed. I'm not going to lie. That moment in the lobby, seeing his face when he realized who I was, that felt amazing. But what we built here over the past 2 years, this feels better. This lasts. They stood together, godfather and goddaughter, looking around at the company they'd helped transform, the culture they'd helped build, the lives they'd helped change. And Marcus thought about the journey that brought him here, from that basement in Detroit to the marble lobbies of power, from invisibility to influence, from being underestimated to being undeniable. He thought about all the people who doubted him along the way, all the venture capitalists who'd said no, all the doors that had been closed in his face, because he didn't look like what success was supposed to look like. And he thought about how he'd proved them wrong, not by becoming more like them, but by being unapologetically himself. The story of Marcus Webb going undercover will be told and retold, simplified and mythologized. Some would focus on the drama of the reveal. Some would focus on the business success. Some would focus on the social justice implications. But for Marcus, the story was simpler than that. It was about seeing and being seen. It was about a young woman who needed help and an uncle who'd been willing to do whatever it took to provide it. It was about justice, yes, but also about opportunity. It was about tearing down broken systems and building better ones. And ultimately, it was about the truth that had driven Marcus's entire life. The truth he learned growing up black in America. The truth that fueled his success and motivated his undercover operation. That truth was simple. You are not what people assume about you. You are not the limitations they try to place on you. You are not the box they try to fit you into. You are what you make of yourself, what you build with your own hands and mind and determination. And sometimes to prove that, you have to be willing to become invisible. You have to be willing to be underestimated, to be dismissed, to be overlooked, because only from that position can you truly see the system for what it is. Only from the bottom can you understand what needs to change at the top. Marcus Webb had built an empire. He'd accumulated wealth beyond most people's dreams. He'd achieved success by any conventional measure. But his proudest moment wasn't closing his first billion-dollar deal or ringing the bell at the stock exchange. It was standing in that lobby, in a janitor's uniform, with coffee dripping off his jacket, and choosing to wait just a little longer before revealing himself. It was the patience to let Derek and Richard and all the others show their true natures. It was the discipline to document everything, build his case, and then use his power not just for revenge but for transformation. That was the real story. Not the billionaire who bought a company, but the man who was willing to lose everything he'd built, his status, his comfort, his identity, to understand the truth and fight for something better. As the sun set over the city and the dedication ceremony concluded and people began to drift back to their offices and their lives, Marcus remained in the lobby for a moment longer. He looked at the floor, remembering what it felt like to mop it. He looked at the elevator, remembering taking it to the basement every night instead of to the executive suites. He remembered being invisible. And then he walked out into the evening, a powerful man who'd learned the value of powerlessness, a visible man who'd learned from invisibility, a billionaire who'd spent 3 weeks as a janitor and come away richer for the experience. The coffee stain on that old jacket in his office would remain a permanent reminder of the moment that had changed everything, the moment when Derek Cashman had spilled coffee on a man he thought was nobody and discovered, too late, that everybody is somebody, that dignity is not determined by job title or bank account, and that the person you dismiss today might be the person who determines your fate tomorrow. That was a lesson. That was a story. And that was why Marcus Webb would never forget the feeling of that hot coffee splashing across his chest, the sound of cruel laughter echoing through the marble lobby, and the moment when he'd stood up, looked into the eyes of his tormentor, and said one simple word that had changed everything. No, that was where it had all begun, and in many ways, where it continued. Because every day was a new opportunity to say no to injustice, no to prejudice, no to the systems that crushed potential and wasted talent. And every day was a new opportunity to say yes to something better, something fairer, something more reflective of the simple truth that talent is universal even if opportunity is not. Marcus Webb had learned that truth in a basement in Detroit. He'd proved it building a $4 billion empire, and he'd lived it during 3 weeks as a janitor, invisible to those in power, seeing everything they thought no one important could see. That was the story, the whole story, and it was far from over.